Welcome, everybody, to Here's Johnny. We are a weekly horror media podcast focusing primarily on movies and video games. My name is Justin.
And my name is Larry. We'd like to welcome all of you to our very first episode of Here's Johnny. This episode is just going to look at a little bit about me and Justin, what this show is going to focus on, and then kind of give you a preview what this first season is going to look like.
Yeah, I'm really excited to do this, actually.
Yeah, and so since this podcast was Justin's idea, we're going to let him introduce himself a little bit first. So go ahead, Justin.
Sure thing. Well, I guess, my name is Justin. I've loved horror for as long as I can remember. I don't really have anything else to say about myself right now.
All right. Well, I got a little bit more. So, again, my name's Larry. If you want to, you can follow me on Twitter at BeaverLA. But why I love horror, there's two big parts to it. The first is that I love being afraid. Like, it's a feeling that I seek out constantly. I've done it since I was a kid, and I still do it now. I mean, there have been times when I was in college, I was going to school in New York State. And I'm not sure if you've heard about it, but there's an abandoned insane asylum up there called Letchworth.
I have not.
It was on the Ghost Hunters TV show.
Oh, right on.
And one Halloween, me and a couple of roommates snuck into it and did a little urban exploring. And I've done a bunch of stuff like that. I mean, there was a small insane asylum back where I used to grow up, where me and my friends used to go messing around in on Friday nights and getting ourselves into trouble. And then, the feeling of like being afraid is just so liberating. Like, it's just so much fun to, not know what's coming behind the next corner or like what's hiding underneath the bed. It's just something that no other feeling I've ever felt can match it. So that's a big reason. And the other part is when I was a little kid, my dad told me that I wasn't allowed to watch or play or read scary stuff because it would corrupt me. So just like anything else in life, when someone says not to do it, you find a way to do it.
Oh, see, I had older brothers. So, when I was 5, I remember them sitting down and pretty much telling me, oh, yeah, this Child's Play movie. Oh, it's just it's a kid's movie. We can watch it. Mom and Dad aren't home. Well, yeah, I had nightmares for weeks.
Yeah, see, I'm the oldest of my siblings, so I didn't have that, but I did have a couple of cousins and some buddies growing up who let me like borrow their VHSs. Got my hands on some old VHSs and got to see those. And then actually my first experience with a scary game was going to my friend's house, and he had Resident Evil 2. And I got really good at beating it in like a night because that's all I had. I had to beat it before I went home. And same with like the library. Like, library doesn't care what books you checked out. Like, I was a 5th or 6th grader and I was taking home it. So like they didn't. So the library used to do good things for me. But yeah, that's for me. I loved being scared. And when Justin reached out on Twitter and he said, "Is anybody interested in scary stuff and also interested in doing a podcast?" I sent him a DM and I was like, "All right, man, what ideas do you have?"
Yeah, and we pretty much went back and forth on that for, I don't know, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks, maybe.
Yeah, kind of fine-tuning what we wanted to do.
Yeah, and then we came to this, and we seemed to be on the same page about practically everything, so it seemed like a really good fit.
Yeah, and we're going to see where it goes from here. So, Justin, for our audience that don't know, me and Justin actually never met face-to-face. He's actually in Canada, and I'm in the old US of A. So we don't really know much about each other or about our audience. So we're going to ask each other some pretty typical, what's your favorite kind of stuff in horror? And you're going to learn about it with us at the same time. So Justin, as so famously said in Wes Craven's classic, what's your favorite scary movie?
So my favorite scary movie has probably got to be Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original. There's just, to me, there's just something, it's just real. Like it's got a realistic feel to it. And it's just pretty much a group of people stranded out in the middle of nowhere. at the mercy of a bunch of weirdos.
It's very gritty.
Oh yes, yeah.
It's very gritty.
Where I live, behind me, maybe like 5 minutes behind me, pretty much looks like all the settings of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like it's just fields and like random abandoned farmhouses and houses. And
you have big old farm fields in Canada?
Surprisingly, yes. Not everything is frozen.
I just figured it's just one big old Iditarod racetrack.
Oh no. We're a little bit more than that. Yeah.
All right, perfect. Well,
what about yourself?
It's a classic. Oh, so I have 2. I cheated. I couldn't get further down than 2. So I
had to really struggle to get down to 1. So I understand.
So I have my favorite scary movie, and then the scary movie that I feel was most important to like me loving the genre.
Okay.
So I wanted to give what I think is most important for me and like why it's so important. So that's The Faculty.
Okay, interesting.
I'm not sure if you've seen that one.
You know what? I've seen a little bit of it, not the whole thing.
Yeah.
But
so basically, it's Frodo Baggins trying to fight aliens from taking over his school.
You know what? Actually, if I can interrupt you for a second, The Faculty. You know what? I think that's actually my wife's favorite movie.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. My grandpa, he used to collect horror movies. Like he was really big into sci-fi and horror, and he had it. And like I said, I was younger, and I was like, I took it. Like I took the VHS out of the box, put another VHS in it, and took it home with me and watched it. And I watched it so many times. Like I can quote that movie still to this day, like word for word. I just love it. And I've watched it so many times, like it's not scary anymore. Like the acting isn't the best in it. The plot's kind of goofy, but my all-time favorite scary movie, which I watch every Halloween, and I push on anybody who will listen to me talk about it, is the Blair Witch Project.
Oh, nice. I'm assuming the original.
Oh yes.
Okay.
I've seen all of them. I even jumped in I'll admit it, to the new one that came out last year. But the original Blair Witch, I know it's kind of dull up front. I know, like looking back on it now, it isn't as scary as what it once was. But as a kid who used to go hunting a lot with my family and who spends a lot of time in the woods and who really likes the woods, the idea of going out in the woods betraying you, and like all that crap just kind of falling in on you, and that house at the end. Like I've come across abandoned houses like that during like hikes and stuff, and it just seems like it could be so real, and it's why it's so scary to me, because it really seems like it would not take too much for the world to spin a little bit out of whack, and for you to end up facing down the Blair Witch, I guess. So I love it.
You know what I'm finding really interesting is that both of our favorite movies tend to be on the more realistic side of things.
Yeah, there's something to be said for
it's just something that, you know, if it hits home, it tends to stick with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot easier to be afraid of something that you know can happen than something that is a little bit more far-fetched. But I'm sure we'll hop into that. Yeah. But Justin, it's your turn again. What is your favorite horror game?
Actually, you brought it up earlier. It's Resident Evil 2.
Okay.
It was I think my first horror game that I ever played. Again, being the youngest of 4. I remember my brother brought home this shiny new PlayStation and a copy of Resident Evil 2, and he went out with his friends, and I, being a smart ass, thought I would go into his room and play it with all the lights off, and I had nightmares for weeks.
Sure.
It was, I have to say, it was the scene where when you're in the cop station and you're walking around and you get, I believe, upstairs, and you're walking by the window and the liquor walks by.
Oh yeah.
The window. And then you round that corner, and then there he is, upside down, and the crazy cutscenes from back then.
Yep.
I don't think I touched that game for like 2 months after that, but it stuck with me, and I play it probably once a year now.
Even with the tank controls.
Oh yeah. See, you know what? I know a lot of people hate tank controls, but I don't know. It's the controls I grew up with, so I don't like them, but I can deal with them.
Yeah, I played Resident Evil 2 earlier this year, and it's been a long time since I played it, but I picked it up at one of the used game shops here. And I was like, I'm going to play it. Like, it's been a while. Let's try it out. And it took me a good 4 or 5 hours to just get the controls down so I could play the game.
Yeah.
Because I knew if I went to the police station and started trying to actually play the game and not having good control of that, it would be brutal. So I'm very excited for the remake because I don't think I want to have to deal with that anymore.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Also, I have to say the remake looks terrifying, and I'm so excited.
Oh, yeah. Like, during all the E3, I wasn't expecting to see it, and I thought Kingdom Hearts 3 would be the steal away for me, or maybe Fallout 76, but no, Resident Evil 2, hands down. Cannot wait for that game.
Oh, it's so exciting. Sorry, what's your favorite horror video?
Well, I'm sticking with Capcom, and I'm also sticking with the Resident Evil series, but mine is actually Resident Evil 4.
Okay, right on.
So like I said, wasn't allowed to have scary stuff when I was growing up, but my mom was less knowledgeable than my dad was.
Okay, yeah, I see where this is going.
And she used to let me, if I was really good when we were out shopping, because I have a bunch of little sisters, so if I was really well behaved, she'd take me to GameStop. I could pick one thing out. And so we went into GameStop, and I saw this 10 edition box for a GameCube game, which all I had was Mario at the time, with a big bloody 4 on it. And it had this awesome strategy guide, and I was like, I'm getting it. And my mom's like, well, what is this game? And I was like, oh, it's like an investigation game. You got to figure out the crime, which wasn't the most.
No, I mean, you're not lying,
bad lie
right?
I ever told. I mean, and I brought it home, and like I said, I had to hide it, so I would wait till my entire family went to bed. Which, with 4 sisters and mom and dad, you got to wait pretty late.
Yeah.
And my bedroom's in the basement, so I'm sitting there with headphones on, playing it. And man, I own that game on every single console it's available on, including the iPad. I have sped run it just for my own amusement. I can literally find every single hidden gem or hidden artifact that's in that game.
Do you have the big chainsaw controller for the GameCube?
No, I don't. And I've been hunting one down. That is something I really, really want. But I do have the original double-sided poster, which I used to flip around. So my friends were there, it'd be the side with Leon getting his head chopped off. But when my parents were around, it was the more docile Leon walking through the town. But no, Resident Evil 4. I can't wait till we play it on this podcast. I can't wait to do another run through it. It is by far my favorite scary game.
So quick question about that. So when you played number 4, had you played number 3 before that? No.
So all I had played before 4 was Resident Evil 2. And that was only, like I said, a few times over my friend's house, just running through Leon's story. Because like I said, all I had was the sleepover.
Yeah.
So
you didn't get a chance to do both.
Exactly. I wasn't until recently where I actually was able to play through Claire's storyline too. But before Resident Evil 4, all I had was Resident Evil 2, and I was getting the Game Informer magazine, so I had kind of an idea what to expect. And just the controls are perfect. The story is so much fun. It's just really good. It's by far one of my top 3 games all time. And I love it. I love Leon. Ashley sucks, even to this day. And it's crazy that even though she's so bad and gets in the way of every time, that I still love the game so much. But yeah, I love Resident Evil 4. So moving on.
Before we move on, I have to say, I'm glad both of our favorite games is in the Resident Evil series.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're going to have to make sure we don't bias our ratings too much when we get to them, because
it's going to be hard.
I love Capcom. But next, Justin, tell me, what is your favorite movie monster? And monsters in quotations doesn't actually have to be a beast. It can be any movie monster.
Not to give anything away, because we obviously did talk about some of the stuff we've seen and haven't seen before this. So I'm actually going to have to say my favorite monster is the monster from It Follows. There's just something so terrifying about it's a monster that doesn't stop. It keeps coming towards you. Granted, it's only a walk, but I mean, you have to sleep eventually. And I know you haven't seen It Follows.
I have not.
So
I have not seen It Follows.
So I'm not going to say anything else because I don't want to spoil anything, but just know that every once in a while that monster comes into my mind, and I get freaked out, and I can't sleep for a couple days.
Yeah. All right, perfect.
What about yourself?
So mine, kind of a similar reasoning behind it, but it's Michael Myers.
Interesting. Okay.
The idea, like you said, of something that has a sole focus, that doesn't run, he walks. And if you look at, like, you cut out some of the crazier stuff with some of the different movies.
Yeah.
Kind of the original premise is like there is no reason for his madness, right? And it looks like this new Halloween that's coming out this fall is cutting out all that kind of crazy stuff.
Yeah, I
in the
think
trailer,
I
they
read
even
somewhere
say
that
like,
it's supposed to be like a direct sequel to, I think, 1 or 2.
yeah, exactly. And even in the trailer, like they say, like, wasn't it her brother? It's like, no, that's just an urban legend. So that kind of sucks because I really liked Halloween H2O.
Okay.
But it seems like they're cutting that out of it too. But no, I don't know. Just, you never see his face. He has that creepy mask on.
Yep.
And he doesn't, like I said, he doesn't chase you. He just walks after you because he knows he's going to grab you. Yeah. And I don't know. There's just something about the presence of Michael Myers that to this day even just shocks me. So no, I love him. So now, Justin, what is your favorite horror book?
So my favorite horror book is probably The Shining, actually. I read it for the first time this year.
Mm-hmm.
When I was growing up, I didn't really read a lot of horror books unless it was novelizations of the Resident Evil games, surprisingly.
Oh, those aren't bad, though. S.D. Perry did a good job.
Oh, I know. You know what? I wish Trent was in those games. It's the reason they have the maps. Anyways, but, I'll give it away right now. That's going to be our first review, is the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to give anything away about why I love the book, because I think the book will come up a lot in our review.
Yeah, not only that, but I mean, it's the namesake of the podcast. So
what about yourself?
I am sticking with Stephen King.
Okay.
And my favorite, actually, though, is Salem's Lot.
Okay, interesting.
It's actually the second Stephen King book I read, because I read Carrie first. And that was spooky in its own right, but I'm not a teenage girl and I wasn't in high school, so that kind of stuff didn't weigh on me that well.
Yeah.
But Salem's Lot, the idea that creepy old guy moves in the town, a little kid starts realizing stuff's going sideways, no one listens to the little kid, and then literally before you know it, the whole town's dead and they're all vampires. And it's just written so well and the pace is done perfectly. And like I said, I read it again this year, and even though it's so old and like technology now, kind of like cell phones would have been a huge help, but it's still very easy to put yourself in that time and place.
Well, that's the thing I find with, especially with a lot of the older horror movies and books and everything, is everything's so technologically advanced now, right? You kind of have to push that aside and
exactly
try to remember what it was like back then.
Yeah, and it's easier for you and I to do it because we're older. We aren't that old, but we're older, and we can remember a time where that wasn't an option. And I think like if I were to give it to like I guess a kid who was my age when I first read it, I read like I was 10 or 11, and give it to him, like that wouldn't be as scary because like, well, why didn't they just hop on the internet, right? Why didn't they just call somebody? And like that wasn't an option then. Like it wasn't there.
I remember seeing a cell phone in like grade 9 and freaking out.
Yeah, like, I didn't get my first cell phone until I was a senior in high school. Yeah. So like it was really easy for me to see it, and I think that's gonna be coming into like when we get into our reviews, we'll discuss that and kind of contextualize it. Yeah. But no, for me, I love vampires, and really, it's not Dracula that did it for me. It was Salem's Lot.
Interesting. Well, you know what? I didn't tell you this before when we were talking about some of the stuff, but I've never seen or read Salem's Lot.
So don't waste your time on the movies. The Rob Lowe one is so far off from the text that it's just trash, even though I like Rob Lowe. Yeah. And then the older one, it's just, I don't know, it's kind of too cheesy. Barlow, like the main vampire, he looks really cool in it, but honestly, I would skip them both and just read the book.
Well, maybe I'll have to do that.
All right, so last thing we're going to talk about in this kind of introductory section is we're going to break from our favorites, and we're going to talk about what our least favorite trend in horror media has been. So Justin, what is your least favorite thing in the horror genre?
Found footage, actually.
Really? Okay.
Well, I need to point some things out first. I think there are some movies that can do it really, really, really well, like the Blair Witch. You know what? I wasn't a huge fan of the new Blair Witch, but I liked the way it was filmed. I thought they did.
Yeah, the first time I watched it, so I saw it in theaters. I jumped because there were some good jump scares.
Yes.
Bought it when it came out on DVD, on Blu-ray.
Yeah.
Watched it again, and I was like, "Oh man."
Oh yeah, like when I went to watch it in theaters, it was, I think, 2 weeks after it came out, so it was completely empty, and the theater was completely dark, and it was just me and my wife. It was terrifying. But yeah, I've seen it again since, and not a huge fan of the story or anything, but the way it was shot, they did it really good. But I feel like the bad really outweighs the good on this. Like, I don't know if you've seen like Apollo 18.
No, okay. But I have seen the bad found footage. Like, I can't remember the name of it. I watched one about some like Europeans who like go try to find a witch in the woods. Like, oh, it's like Blair Witch, and it's like shaky cam like to the extreme, and like like
I just find that dumb. And it's really it's the only trend I think that for me, if it's not done good, I might get motion sick.
Oh yeah, me too. Like I've turned some off, like throwing on a random Netflix one, and it's like, yep, not dealing with this.
Yeah, and I can't stand it. So everything else, there's some other trends that I'm not a huge fan of, but at least I can finish those movies. And that's really it. That's got to be my least favorite trend in horror. What about yourself? Yes.
So mine, I'm happy we've been different in everything so far, but mine is actually the torture porn horror movies.
Okay. Like Saw.
I like the original Saw because I don't think the original Saw really did it, but everything that kind of came after that.
Thank you, because Saw is one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, the original Saw is it's like a legitimately scary, good movie, and we will eventually review it. But I mean, the ones that came after it were literally like, how much guts can we throw on the screen? Human Centipede is actually the worst one for me. In particular, the second one. I was in college and I was like up late one night studying, and I got 2 screens, so trying to stay awake, I threw one on. Like I said, I like scary movies, and there's a scene in that one where like a pregnant woman gets in a car, and it's some really disgusting stuff happens, and that's not scary. That's just gross. And I think when you trade in like setting the mood and setting the music and setting the scene for like, let's see what kind of nastiness we can throw on a TV. To me, that's not scary. That's something entirely different. And it's not something I'm a fan of.
Like, it doesn't have to be gory to be scary. Like, I remember the first Hostel movie, going to see that in theaters, and like the girl's getting her eye cut out or something like that, and it's like spraying out the like whites, like thick white goo, and it's just I don't need that.
Yeah, and like it's weird because I really like Eli Roth. Spoiler alert, he's one of my favorite horror directors, and like there's Hostel. Like Hostel's pretty brutal. Green Inferno is, I won't lie, I thought I was gonna have to walk out of the theater and throw up during that one.
Oh, interesting.
But
I've never seen it.
I think it's a brutal one, and it's different because, especially for Green Inferno, like he was doing an homage to the classic cannibal movies.
Yeah.
So like he was literally trying to make it just like that. And if you watch like Cannibal Holocaust and you watch those older films, you know what he was trying to do. But at the same time, like even though I like Eli, I can deal with gore when it's like a cabin fever kind of level, right? Like Eli Roth's like first movie.
Yeah.
Like that's flesh-eating virus, all that credit stuff is kind of like wrapped into the package. It makes sense. Or even like Evil Dead, where it's like super over the top and you know what you're getting into. I don't need to watch someone like cut like parts of their flesh off into a weigh bucket. And I don't need that. And I don't need that. So yeah, torture porn, not for me. It's not my kind of TV.
So this is going to get interesting down the road when we have to start watching.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there's especially if our audience ends up like forcing some of Mana's and makes me sit through like Saw 3D. Like I'll watch it and I'll give you an honest review on it. But
you know what?
I'm sure.
Have you seen Saw 3D?
I have seen every Saw movie.
Okay, I'm not the only one then. Okay.
Yes, I have seen. Actually, I take that back. I have not seen the newest one.
It's okay. Yeah, I don't know.
It's the one that just came out.
Yeah, it's not Saw 1. Let's put it that way.
All right, so with that, we're going to wrap up our introductory section, and we're going to go ahead and go into the news. All right, guys, welcome back. This is our news section. This week, since we're kind of, like I said, introducing ourselves and introducing what the podcast is going to be doing, we are going to cover the news. But each week, we're going to bring up important video game news and movie news.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this episode is just it's already going to run long with us pretty much getting to know each other as well as our audience getting to know us. So
yeah, exactly. And yeah. Real simple.
Right? Yeah.
But we do encourage, like, we are not going to claim to cover every single piece of news that comes out because there's a lot of stuff. And we are going to, like, we're going to do this later, but we're going to cite where we get our news from, so you can kind of go read a full article later on. But if you guys find something that you think we missed or you want us to discuss in this news section, either reach out to us on Twitter at Justin the Pickle Thing, me at Beaver LA. You can also hit it up on the show podcast, or send us an email. So this section is going to be, like I said, us kind of bringing some stuff that we think is important to you. And then also, if you guys find something we missed, let us know. We'll be happy to discuss it. Welcome back, guys. And here is our main topic section. Each week on the podcast, you're going to find our topic here. It will either be a movie review, a game review, a deep dive on, like, horror media, whether it be a genre-defining kind of thing or a director. But this week, on our very first episode, we think it's very important to define what horror is, and probably more importantly than that, why you guys should even listen to Here's Johnny.
It's really important for you guys to know that there's a reason to listen to us. But we also need to, kind of before we get into anything, we have to define what horror is, because there's a lot of mixed signals, I guess you could say, with horror. There are a lot of thriller movies.
Yes, it can be too broad or too specific, and
yes,
after spitball back and forth and kind of defining some stuff, I think we pared it down pretty well.
Hopefully, anyways. I mean,
so first thing, no, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no. All I was going to say is, hopefully we've pared it down enough. And again, if there's anything that you guys don't agree with, or if you guys have thoughts on the matter, yeah, just feel free to either get a hold of us on Twitter. You can email us. Yeah, even just in a review for the episode, just leave it in there. I mean, our plan is to read every review, so hopefully we hear back from you guys about some of this stuff.
So let's just dive in. So what is horror? According to dictionary.com, horror as a noun means an overwhelming and painful feeling caused by something frightfully shocking, terrifying, or revolting, a shuddering fear. And when horror is used as an adjective, it is centered upon or depicting terrifying or macabre events. So that's pretty broad. There's a lot of things that can kind of fit into that category.
And I think that's why it's important that we figure it out what it is to us too, right? Like, I mean, if we were to just go by that, I'm sure there's tens of thousands of movies and games and books and everything that'll fall into those categories.
Anything that had a spider involved in it would be a horror for me.
Yeah, like Eight-Legged Freaks. Yeah, that would be a horror movie. So hopefully
so then, just like I said, we kind of so we established what the dictionary says horror is, but to you, what do you define horror as?
So for me, I'd have to say that horror, when I'm playing or reading or watching something horror based, I always have to feel, not throughout the entire thing obviously, but there needs to be just a sense of something like creepy or malicious happening just like feet away from what we're seeing or playing or whatever, and a constant fear of something real, monstrous, or supernatural. I don't think it needs to be gory. Like, there can be PG-13 movies that scare the crap out of me. I mean,
absolutely.
Like, I will be the first to admit, the first 3/4 of that Mama movie scared the shit out of me. But I don't think there's any gore or anything like that. It's just, I thought it was really good at creating tense scenes, and there was always something real, just kind of weird happening on the side. Yeah, I don't know. It just kind of has to hit these like certain criterias for me. Like, anything like if I'm super stressed out and scared, obviously to me that's it's a horror movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What about yourself? Like
So for me, go ahead.
Oh, I was always going to say, it's like, even honestly, even trying to describe it myself, I can see why it's very open, because it's going to be different to everybody. And I learned that trying to figure out what it is to myself. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. So this is something I spent a lot of time with. I think playing with definitions and kind of using words is fun, and especially when you're trying to like limit a genre or limit something, the scope of something. So I actually have defined horror for myself as anything that makes me question the established order of the world by causing me to think that there is something sinister just beyond my comprehension or consciousness. So like an example of that would be, what would it take for a normal camping trip to go from like a very enjoyable experience to something that could open up doors to the unknown, like a Cabin Fever or a Blair Witch or Evil Dead? Like that thought in my head is what gives me the fear, right? It was what takes the real world and pushes it further. So we discussed, like when we're talking about our favorite scary movies, right? It's they present the world as it is, and then they like twist it just an inch to the right, and then all of a sudden it's no longer normal. And but I think a big thing for me when it comes to the horror, like the questioning must cause some kind of irrational fear, because I think there's a really big difference to like going on a camping trip and being afraid that a bear is going to attack you, as opposed to like being afraid that the Blair Witch is going to like steal your map and get you lost. Right. I think there's two very real differences there. And even though the bear thing can be scary, I mean, no one would ever say The Revenant is a scary movie, right?
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
So now we're going to discuss what our seasons will be. Each season is going to focus on a specific subcategory of horror. The subcategories are based on different movie monsters, with, again, the monsters in quotations, because not all monsters have fur and big teeth.
It's also really important to know that when we're done a season, that's not going to be the end of that subgenre. We're always meant to come back to it. We just kind of want to keep cycling it out so we don't get stuck.
Yeah, I think it'd be very easy to get bogged down in one of these categories and end up spending 2-3 years just talking about a certain monster. And easily. Not only for us, we can get bored, and we don't want our audience to get bored either. So we think about having a nice 8 to 10 week season and letting our audience know straight up we will return to them in the end.
And we will also be, every once in a while we might be throwing in a random episode from a random sub. Like if we have like a guest or something like that down the lines, it's.
Yeah, we exactly. We've also discussed doing like holiday specials, because horror is very good at finding leprechauns and Easter bunnies and making them scary. Yeah. So we do kind of plan on dropping those.
Hold on. I wouldn't use scary.
How about scary looking?
Okay. I can live with that.
But yeah, so we're going to go into each of the categories we've defined, and then so our audience knows where they're at, and we'll go from there. So our first category is alien. And again, like I said, I like definitions, so I kind of defined them. But we're going to base it on an extraterrestrial threat. But the medium must focus more on the horror element of the extraterrestrial threat instead of the action. And we have defined extraterrestrial, again, from dictionary.com, as outside or originating outside the limits of the Earth. And that's lowercase e. So we don't necessarily doesn't have to be from Mars. It can be something beyond what's normally here on the planet. And this, like, I feel like this definition of the subcategory makes it very easy to see why Alien is a horror movie, but why Independence Day wouldn't be a horror film.
And again, I feel like I need to keep reiterating this, but if you guys have any, comments or concerns, if you guys feel like we find a movie that isn't a horror movie, but you guys feel like it is, just let us know. We want to have that back and forth.
Yeah, and not only that, like we fully plan when we review these movies to kind of discuss how well they fit into the subcategory we placed them in, because on our big master list, which you guys don't have access to, but we will tell you, Green Inferno. We talked about it earlier. Eli Roth movie about the the Greenpeace workers who are trying to save the forest and end up captured by cannibals, right? We actually place that in Alien because we feel like that's where it fits best, because they're on an alien world, right? I mean, the tribal people are alien to them. So that's where we placed it. Maybe when we watch it, we'll find a better category to place it in. But that's kind of the discussion we want to have, is have these categories, place them in there, and then after we review the media, kind of parse it out after that. And we would love to hear our audience's opinions too on it.
Oh yeah, definitely, 100%. So the next category we have is deranged man. So that's going to be based on what a normal person should be, but he acts outside the established social norms. So like,
exactly,
pretty much a lot of the horror movies from like the late 70s, early 80s, like your Friday the 13th, Halloween's. I'm not 100% sure about Nightmare on Elm Street yet. That's something I feel like we need to discuss, but
yeah, and when we use man, we aren't saying like male, we're saying like human. So obviously Friday the just so there's no confusion, we are including every gender because they can all be kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Then our next subcategory, and it's actually going to be the theme of our first season, is ghosts. And the ghost section subcategory is going to be based on paranormal or supernatural entities that do not explicitly derive their power or source from an objective religious nature. And that'll make sense later on when we get into one of the other categories. But basically, we're talking about ghosts that are ghosts not because of like demons and angels, but because they're here, they're in the environment, and there's something you have to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? Honestly, even just talking about it, I am really excited to get some of these going. I mean, I know you said earlier that they don't have access to the master list. I think the reason for that is because it's going to be ever changing, ever growing, shrinking.
Yes.
It's like, I think it's changed like 6 times since we originally thought of it. Like,
oh yeah, I'm constantly tweaking with it and looking at where I place stuff and wondering if it's the best placement for it. So it's these categories are not meant to be complete and they're not meant to be perfect, but they are meant to give us a basis and something to discuss on.
Yeah. And with that, our next subgenre is the kaiju. So as from dictionary.com, when you use it as a noun, it's a giant monster, particularly such as those relating to Japanese science fiction.
I'll just say, and for our purposes, right, we're dropping the giant part and we're dropping the Japanese origin part.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's pretty much a science fiction horror movie where I don't know.
Kind of. We gotta be careful because there is a section for that. It's based on the monsters, right? It's the
actual monster.
Yes, and it's like there are differences, but again, we use kaiju because I think it's very specific. And spoiler alert, we will review like Godzilla. Like Godzilla is a horror. The original Godzilla is considered one of the classic horror films. But again, we're not using kaiju in the very strict sense of this is what a kaiju is. It's more of we needed a word. I didn't want to use monster. The next subcategory is mad scientist. And we are basing this category on the tear from rogue scientific research or their experiments and or the scientist himself. So the difference between this category and deranged man is that there is a explicit focus on science, right? Because you never say Michael Myers is a mad scientist.
Yeah. Okay.
But you would say Dr. Frankenstein is. So that's kind of where we're delineating that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have really anything to add to that. That's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, like I said, this is one of our more specific categories, and I think that it's self-evident. But again, that's why when Justin was talking earlier, I wanted to get very clear, like the science part, like the science or the more science fiction movies will probably fall into the mad scientist category.
Yeah. And with that, our next category is religious. So this is going to be based on tangible and intangible aspects of religion. So pretty much like demons to crazy religious people to kind of whatever those kinds of people are really capable of doing.
Exactly. And that's what we talked about earlier with the ghosts, right? Because there are some ghosts that don't need the whole idea of God to exist, but there are some like the demons, right, that do. And there are some that kind of fall in an if ground because, for example, Conjuring 2, right? The nun isn't really a religious figure. She uses that imagery in order to invoke a fear. So I wouldn't even call Conjuring 2 a really a religious film, even though it's again definitions and playing around with where they fall. But that's kind of where our thought process is at. The next category is going to be transformed man. So this is based on the fears, both personal and societal, of man being anything other than normal. So this is more like your werewolves, your hill people, movies like Freaks. They would fall in this category. So it's not so much the deranged man where the person's acting outside of it. This is like there's something happening to this person that has caused him to transform what man should be.
So with that, I have a question. Would you consider The Hills Have Eyes deranged man or transformed man?
Transformed man.
Okay, I'm glad we're on the same
page. Lots of inbreeding.
Yeah.
Yes, lots of inbreeding.
Lots
of inbreeding. Again, like that's also, I put Texas Chainsaw Massacre on the deranged man because even though there is inbreeding, I mean, Leatherface isn't really that different than man, right? He's a deranged man. The fear comes from him being so far beyond societal norms, not from him being an inbred. Whereas The Hills of Eyes, like that kind of is a different kind of theme to it. I don't know, maybe we'll watch it and revisit that, or our audience will kind of give us different feelings on it when we get to it. But that's where we're placing it right now.
Yeah, I know. I agree 100%. So with that comes our next subcategory. Probably the easiest to define,
but hardest to place films into.
Yes. So it's going to be undead. It's pretty much, I think it covers anything that's was living and then died and then was reanimated. Zombies would fall here, but like rage infected people, like 28 days later, they would not.
Exactly. And that's going to be kind of hard too, right? Because there are some zombie movies where throughout the course of the plot, you find out that they really aren't dead. They're still alive. They can come back. There's fine lines to be had, which again is very easy to say this is what undead is, but to actually place the movies in, because some movies take so much liberty with the genre, it's a little bit more difficult.
But on the plus side, there's probably tens of thousands of zombie movies, undead movies.
Thanks to thanks to Mr. Romero, I think we will have our hands full.
Yeah.
Then the next category is vampire. Again, like undead, super self-explanatory. However, we are going to specifically focus on the vampire media where you see a more monstrous side of the vampire and not the more sexual side. Obviously, the sexual side is kind of tied to Dracula and the vampire stories from when it first started, because there's a real sexual nature to the idea of a vampire. But it makes the difference between Dracula and Interview with a Vampire, right? Where those are two very different kind of vampire movies. And again, like there might be some we missed. And again, if you think one should be considered, we will absolutely add it to the list and review it. But however, in the status quo, that's how we're defining our vampire movies.
Yeah, I mean, I like you said, with any of these, we're open. Just let us know. Like we're kind of again, we're just trying to figure it out as we go to where stuff falls. So even if it's something, say we review a movie, and then 3 months later you happen to listen to that and you don't agree, still let us know. I'm interested. I want to know what you have to say.
We absolutely. Yeah, we are constantly open to positive critiques and just kind of stuff that allows us to develop better. But these categories in the next one, like this is going to be how we're placing them for now. And then once we run through them all, I still think no matter what, these will be the categories we use and just kind of drop the films into it.
For sure. And with that, our last subcategory for now is witchcraft. So it's going to be based on someone who manipulates spirits or nature in order to accomplish something horrific, I guess you could say. So using this, like the Blair Witch Project would be under witchcraft and not ghosts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And this is, again, definitions, right? Definitions can kind of make things go either way. But obviously there is a very satanic aspect to witches, but we're kind of pulling witches out of that in order to have their own category. I think you should really look at The Omen differently than how you would look at a movie like Blair Witch or like The Witch, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of very different ways that the horror comes across in that medium. So to have one specifically on witchcraft, I think it's really important because there are a lot of films out there that look at it, and even though there is, though, like I said, the religious nature to it, it is different.
Yeah, and also with these subcategories, we're going to be doing games as well. Now, finding some games to fit some of these subcategories is going to be difficult.
Yes.
So if you have suggestions, please let us know.
Yes, we do have a match list for games too, and again, it's kind of the same thing with the movies. We've been kind of moving them around, right? Because Resident Evil 4, yeah, it's got the undead in it, but it also has some really overt religious nature to it with the whole idea of the monsters and that. There's just, it's hard, but we'll review it. We'll put it in the best place we can, and when we're done, we'll place it where we think the final list will be.
Well, exactly, and like say we do, like let's say when we get to Vampire, we find a Vampire game to play, and by the end of it, we don't agree. Maybe it was marketed as some kind of Vampire game, or from the outside, it looks like a Vampire game. When we play it and finish it and review it, maybe by the end, it isn't really a Vampire game, but when we're done, we'll figure out where it belongs and we'll put it in that category.
Absolutely. So the next thing we're going to talk about here is we're going to let you know how we are going to review the games and the movies. And for the games and the movies, they're going to be reviewed with the same criteria and on the same scale. That way, when we finish a season, right, when we finish the Ghost season, we can place them all on a scale because they were reviewed using the same criteria. And that's something, like I said, we're focusing on horror movies and games. And so by having this kind of criteria, it's going to allow us to take a really honest, even look at all the media we take in.
Yeah, and when we're done everything, we hopefully will maybe release some kind of list, if you will, like, what was our top favorite in movies and our games, and then maybe add those together and out of the movies and games, what was the best?
Exactly.
To us, what was the best piece of Ghost media we watched or played or whatever. Yeah.
So our reviews are going to be based out of 40, and there's 4 sections that we rank out of 10. We are going to then add Justin's score to my score, so it'll be a total score out of 80. Then we'll divide what we had by the grand total and get a percentage, and then we're going to set it on a grading scale, right? So instead of like 5-star reviews or how Fumatsu does it out of 40 like that, we are going to literally give it an A+ to an F rating. Yeah, and we're just basing that on like a normal college level A through F scale.
Yeah, we're taking the horror genre itself to school.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So our first category that we're going to rank out of 10 will be plot. We'll tell you now, we'll tell you before every review, but every single plot review will have spoilers in it. Most of the stuff we review will be old. We do plan on reviewing some movies on release, such as Halloween, but we are going to have spoiler-filled reviews because we feel that's the best way to actually discuss the plot. And you've been told now, it'll be told on review day as well, we will have spoilers.
Yeah, I feel like it's... I know spoilers and the internet is a huge thing, so we're trying to make this as clear as possible that we are going to talk about everything.
Exactly, and there's nothing wrong with having spoilers if you know they're coming forward. Yeah. If you don't listen to the episode till after you see it, that's fine too, but I think it makes it way too hard to discuss the plot of a film or to discuss anything about, especially a horror movie. If you can't discuss like, the twists and turns, like, it makes it way too hard to review. So again, we are going to spoil all of this stuff for you. So you have been warned right off the rip.
Pretty much included in plot is going to be like necessary characters, the villains, and I really like, Larry, what you put here is like the best deaths.
Yep.
Like that's a huge part of horror, I think.
Especially some of the older films where they push the limit, right? Like Suspiria, like they do some crazy stuff with their makeup back then, and I think that it is Like, again, I'm not into torture porn, so I'm not going to sit here and talk about how the reverse bear trap is so awesome. This is more like creative, artistic, expressionistic, not how badly can we mutilate a body.
And sometimes it's better what you don't see.
Oh yeah, I fully agree with that. And again, this will also probably be where we have the discussion about did it fit correctly into the genre that we placed it in?
Yeah,
I mean, into the subcategory we placed it in, right? So if we put it in religious, we end up thinking it's more ghost or it's more witchcraft. Maybe we'll spin it at that point, but this will be where that discussion takes place.
After that, it's going to be cinematography and gameplay. This is kind of where it gets interesting because we want to try to keep it fair for both of them. And I feel like we both think that these two categories kind of go together.
Yes. For as best as we could have done it, right? Because again, we want to place each season's media on the same spectrum. And I think that looking at cinematography for the film and then gameplay for the games, I think that's probably the closest we can get for those two. And again, and these two things really are very simple, right? I mean, you know what cinematography is and you know what gameplay is. And we're going to really take some honest looks at the camera work for the movies. And tell you right now, Justin, I'm not going to be a fan of the tank controls when we get to them. So
yeah, I know. It's okay.
All right, then the next category is going to be audio. And this is going to be very broad, right? Because we are going to be reviewing films like Nosferatu or the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Like, these are films that we are going to look at that don't have spoken word, and they use music and they use atmospheric noise in order to set it. Same with some of the games. Some of the games aren't going to end up having voice acting, and it's going to be atmospheric again.
Up until late PlayStation 2, like none of these games had spoken words. It was all just text boxes.
And exactly. You heard Justin say like Resident Evil 2 is his favorite scary game, and there's not a whole lot of audio when you compare it to like Resident Evil 7. However, it's still scary and it's still important to take a look at that.
Yeah,
because the audio for the horror genre is super important.
Yeah, and obviously, like in the audio section, we'll be talking about music and if anything stood out to us.
Yes,
and I think we just review it as it's presented to us.
Absolutely.
So the next section that brings us to is going to be, I think, what's really interesting for us is how scary the media was. I feel like it's going to be pretty hard because, again, I've played a lot of these games, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of these movies.
Yes.
So we're going to probably try to have to remember what it was like the first time.
Yeah, exactly. I think that some of these, for the games, I haven't played a lot. I've played almost all the Resident Evil, but outside of that, I haven't really dived into them. But for the movies, right, like I said, the faculty scared me because I would definitely went to school the next day thinking my teachers were aliens. But now it doesn't scare me because I've seen it so many times. So not only are we going to discuss like how scary we felt the film was when we watched it this time, it will also be a interpretation of how we felt when we first absorbed the media, right? Because I think those are two different things, but they both fit here.
Yes, big time. I feel like we actually have a pretty good mix here because I've seen horror movies, but a lot of these older ones I've never even seen.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, I'm not like I've seen like Poltergeist and, movies like that, but I don't think I've ever seen Nosferatu.
Oh, really? Yeah. See, yeah. I like the old films. Like I've watched pretty much all the ones from the 20s and the 50s that you see on there, especially the Vincent Price ones. I've seen them all. So I really, really enjoyed the classic horror.
And I'm really, really excited to see kind of, where this genre took hold, really.
Yeah, how we got the torture porn from The Fly.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun road. So that's the 4 categories we're ranking out of 10. we are also going to discuss 2 more sections when it comes to our reviews. The first is going to be how likely will we be to recommend this to scare a friend, right? Like when we end up reviewing, like I said, we're reviewing The Shining, right? So we're going to discuss how likely would we be to say, hey, have you seen The Shining? No, dude, watch it. It's going to scare you. This won't be ranked out of 10. This is more of a discussion piece. And this is also where we want our listeners to, when they send us like their takes on the reviews we're doing, like tell us here, like would you tell someone else to watch this to give them a good scare?
And I would really like to know too, when you're sending us this, if you are willing to recommend it to somebody, I would also like to know if it's the first time you've seen it, or if it's the 100th time you've seen it. Like, I'm really interested.
No, I agree 100%. And whenever we do get game or movie reviews, we will discuss them here in this section. And then the last part of the review is going to be, where does it stack? So Justin's already hinted at this, right? We're going to have a master list, not only of the games, of the movies, of the games, movies combined, but also within the categories. I like making lists and I like categorizing and ranking. So it's going to be a lot of fun in Excel for me.
And I would, hopefully, we will figure out how to share that list. Maybe,
I'm having a lot of I'm having a lot of problems uploading my Excel file that I've built into Google Docs, and not having Google Docs just ruin all of my formulas and making it so you can't even do what I wanted it to do. So
just a little.
I'm working on it. Again, being an international podcast like we are kind of makes some things like that a little difficult.
Yeah, but you know what? I feel like we should just call ourselves an international horror podcast, but
I mean, we are. I mean, it's only the 2 greatest countries in the world, but I guess we're far enough apart that we are international.
Yeah.
So finally, here in our main topic section for this week, we are going to explain ourselves to our audience about why you guys should listen to Here's Johnny, and why you guys should recommend us to friends, and why you should keep tuning in each week.
Yeah, I think it's really important to get across that we are authentic. I will never say a movie's good if I think it's bad. I'll never say a game's good if I think it's horrible. Like,
yes, authenticity is something that me and Justin feel really passionate about. Because, for example, like I said, when it comes to these film reviews, I think it's really important to let you know what we actually think. And I want to plug it later, but to accompany this podcast, I'm also going to be writing up my film reviews, because it's something I have wanted to do for a while. But the big example here for me is The Last Jedi. And I mean, you get all these reviews and all this, it's all pumped up, and then you get to the movie and it's not what you were promised, right? And these people told you it was going to be something so great, and the plot was just something awful, and they crapped on characters, and they killed Admiral Akbar off scene, something I will never forgive Rian Johnson for.
Yeah, me neither.
Like, I think it's so important that our audience knows, like, we aren't doing this to be rich. We aren't doing this because we think we're going to be able to quit our day jobs. We are truly doing this because we want to share our love for the horror genre with others, and to let you know how we actually truly feel about the media we watch. So the other big reason why you should listen to Here's Johnny is that, if you haven't been able to tell yet, Justin and I are pretty passionate about horror. You've heard us talk about how we've loved it for years now. I mean, honestly, decades. And it's something like I said, it's something we really want to share with an audience and get feedback on, and see what other people love horror too.
Yeah, and honestly, one of the reasons I'm most excited for this is I'm going to be getting to see all these old horror movies, even some new horror movies that I haven't had a chance to watch. Like, I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, and like I said, some of these old horror games, like I said, my experience with horror is mostly just Resident Evil and a few other ones sprinkled in here and there. But to play the Silent Hills, and to play the Clock Towers, and to play these games that I've never actually played before, and just kind of see where the genre when it comes to games is gone, I think it's going to be really awesome. And I love playing video games. I'm passionate about it, and I'm excited to do this here. Yeah, and then the last thing about why you should listen to Here's Johnny is we truly want to be as informative as we possibly can. We plan this show on being more than just our opinions. As you've seen already, we provided our sources for our definitions when we needed to use them. We really want to try to let you guys see where our stuff comes from. When we give news, we're going to cite where the news came from. But we're also planning on doing like spotlight episodes and history episodes where we take a really close look at directors or the movie monster itself or the series itself. And when it comes to the history, we want to talk about how has the vampire movies evolved, or how has the vampire genre evolved.
Yeah, and as like whenever we do news and whenever we cite something, we're always going to make sure that we put our sources in the show notes, just so you can read it yourself if you want to. I know sometimes I would rather read something.
Yeah, exactly. And our news section isn't meant to be comprehensive, as we already talked about. It's more meant to say, hey, this happened. And then if you want to read more, check out the show notes. Go see the actual article that we brought up. That way you can see where it came from. And then the other big thing when it comes to how informative we want to be, we're going to provide our audience multiple ways to reach us. Our DMs on Twitter will always be open. We have our email, which will always be available, and we will always read what our listeners send us. And also we have a Discord with several different subcategories, and we'll be constantly on there, Justin and I, to interact with you. And we really hope to build a nice discussion, because that's what makes playing these games and watching these movies fun, is to see if other people were as scared as you, or to see if other people played this game and really hate tank controls like you do.
Yeah, I mean, really, like you said before, like we're not doing this to get rich. We're doing it because we're passionate and we just want to talk to other people about it.
Exactly. So with that, we hope we've explained what we are attempting to do with this podcast. We hope you understand why we made these subcategories and how we define them. And then again, most importantly, why should you guys put in the time and listen to the Here's Johnny podcast? So with that, we're going to wrap up the main topic for this episode and move on to emails and reviews. Now we are on to our emails and review section. This section is going to be where we take our listeners' emails and the reviews posted on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, wherever you may review us, and we read them aloud and give you our feedback.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I've said multiple times, like when we do any of these, we'd love to hear from you guys. Like we would love to have a community, really, like a community of people who are passionate about horror.
Yeah. And we do plan on reading every review and email that is sent in live on podcast.
Yeah.
So please send them in. Your responses are important and we do want to hear them.
Yeah. I mean, if it's a 1-star review, I'd love, I want to know how we can make things better.
Just be constructive and don't be a douche.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
And then obviously this is our first episode, first one going live, so there are no emails or reviews, but you can expect each week for us to hopefully have something to share with you. And now, wrapping things up, thank you so much for listening to the pilot episode of Here's Johnny.
Yeah, I mean, I think it went over pretty well.
Yeah, like I said, got to learn a little bit more about Justin and his thoughts on horror, and you got to hear some of mine.
And I'm glad that we really waited until this first episode to figure each other out.
Yeah, I think it was important for us, because we've been discussing this for about a month now about what we want to do and how we want to set things up. But I think it was cool to give you guys, like I said, honest, passionate, and informative information.
Yeah.
We do want to let our audience know that our very first review, which will be next week, is going to be of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining.
Yeah, and we also kind of want to give you guys a heads up about the first game we're going to be doing. It's going to be Clock Tower 3. So hopefully you guys can join us on those. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
And that episode will come out after The Shining.
Yes.
Again, like I said, the last section is going to be emails and reviews. So if you get a chance and you watch The Shining, we told you exactly how we're going to be reviewing these movies and games. So do the same thing for us. Let us know what you think of how scary a film is or what the cinematography was like. We want to hear that, and we'll read it and we'll give you our feedback too. So again, try to have those into us by Friday morning. We record mainly on Saturdays, so if you send it to us by Friday, we can definitely make sure we get it in on time.
Yeah, so hopefully, if everything goes according to plan, our first review should be live Monday.
Next Monday.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it ends up being the 6th of August.
6th. Yes, yeah.
The 6th of August. Yep. Again, so then now wrapping things up, I do want to let you guys know, I mentioned it earlier in the podcast, but I am really looking forward to doing the movies. It's something I really like to do. And if you go over to my blog at beaverla.tumblr.com, every Tuesday morning, I'm going to be posting the written reviews for the films we watch. And along the way, I might even write reviews for other movies because I do watch a lot of movies. But please come over there. If you don't have time to listen to the full podcast, you can at least see what my written review of it is. Give me feedback on it. I want to kind of test my chops a little bit and see if I still have the old writing skills I used to have in college before having a job made me not do it anymore.
Yeah, and if you guys want to get a hold of us or anything, you can email the show at here'sjohnnypodcast@gmail.com.
And if you want to get a hold of us on Twitter, the podcast Twitter is Here's Johnny Cast. I'm at BeaverLA.
And I'm at Pickle Thing.
In the show notes, you will find a permalink to our show's Discord, where you can hop on and talk to us and talk to other listeners of the podcast about the movies and the games and questions for the show. It's all going to be on there.
Yeah, and I usually leave Discord on my phone all day, so if you guys have something to say, just say it, and hopefully I can get back to you as soon as possible.
Because again, we really, really, really want to interact with our audience.
Yeah, I think that's really the main point of.
And then finally, we do have a Patreon. Again, this will always be a free podcast. We are not trying to get rich off it, but if you are able to spare some money and you are able to help support us, we would really appreciate it. There's a lot of cool tiers on there. If you hop on there, you can see it yourself. We aren't going to go into it now. But every single dollar that the show makes will go directly back into the show, whether it's us getting better mics or getting a hold of harder to reach games. It's all going to be going right back in.
And just so you guys know, behind the scenes, yes, maybe one of us does need a better mic.
Yes, but again, we aren't trying to make money on this. This is a passion project. This is me and Justin loving horror and hopefully finding some other people out there in this world that love horror too. So again, you can hop on there. There's different tiers. There's tiers where you can force a movie. There's tiers where you can force a game. If you're interested, please go to the Patreon. It's at Here's Johnny Podcast and consider doing that. But again, it will never be needed. It will never keep you from accessing our reviews or accessing the podcast. It's just something there to hopefully help us expand in the future.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm just really excited to get this going.
Me too, Justin. So again, join us next week when we review The Shining. And until then, make sure you are very careful to check under your bed at night.